My wife asked for a divorce. I want everything but our daughter. I gave it to her with no fight. She thought she won until her lawyer yelled in court. The moment my wife asked for a divorce, demanding everything we had, except our daughter, I knew exactly what I had to do. I looked at my lawyer and simply said, "Give it all to her." People thought I'd broken, but they had no idea the secret I'd uncovered at 2 a.m., long before any papers were filed. My name is Arthur. I'm 54, and I work as a building inspector. I spend my days walking into structures that look solid from the outside, finding the rot hiding under fresh paint, the cracked foundations, water damage behind drywall. You learn to spot the small things that tell you something's wrong before the whole thing collapses. I never thought I'd have to use those same instincts on my own marriage. Chloe and I had been together for 22 years. We had Grace, our daughter, who was 16 and smarter than both of us combined. For most of those years, things were, well, fine. Or at least, I thought they were. Chloe worked part-time at a dental office, managed the house, did the mom thing. We weren't rich, but we were stable. Then, about 10 months ago, she told me she wanted to start a business. Homestaging, she called it, helping people sell houses by making them look better. She said she'd always had an eye for design, that she wanted something of her own. I supported it. I even helped her set up the LLC, co-signed on a business credit card, let her use our joint savings for initial inventory. I thought it was good for her to have a project. I had no idea what I was actually funding. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday night. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I heard movement downstairs. Thinking maybe Grace couldn't sleep, I went to check. But it was Chloe in the kitchen, her face lit by the blue glow of her phone. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. When she noticed me, she flipped the phone over, fast, too fast. I asked if everything was okay. She said it was just a client being annoying at weird hours. I nodded and went back upstairs, but something felt off. The next morning, her phone was on the counter while she was in the shower. I'm not proud of this, but I looked. The messages were still open. I saw things like, "The new place is almost ready and you're unstoppable." And then one that made my stomach drop, "Can't wait to be free of the dead weight." I didn't confront her. I didn't yell or throw the phone or demand explanations. I just put it back down, made coffee, and went to work. Because I've learned that when you find a problem in a structure, you don't start swinging a hammer right away. You document. You measure. You figure out how deep it goes. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things, at first. A throw blanket my mom had given us years ago disappeared. Then, a lamp from the living room. A chair from the dining set. Chloe said she was using them for staging jobs, that she'd bring them back, but they never came back. Then bigger items started vanishing. Our coffee table. The bookshelf from the hallway. And then one Saturday, I came home from inspecting a commercial site, and the couch was gone. Not our couch. But a couch. A cheap, beige sectional that looked like it came from a discount warehouse. Grace walked in behind me, saw it, and just stopped. She looked at me with this exhausted expression and said, "So the couch just died, I guess." Chloe came downstairs with her phone in her hand and said it was temporary, that the other one was at a staging job and this was just a loaner. Grace just said, "Sure, Mom, whatever," and went upstairs. I watched my daughter's face and I knew she didn't believe it either. The house was starting to feel empty, like we were living in a showroom instead of a home. But I still didn't say anything. I kept watching. Then about 2 weeks later, Grace came into my home office with her laptop. She had this nervous energy, like she didn't want to tell me but felt like she had to. She turned the screen toward me. "Dad, I found something weird." It was Facebook Marketplace. Chloe was selling our stuff, our furniture, our belongings, under a fake name. The account wasn't hers. It was listed under Jessica Adams, but the photos were clearly taken in our house. I could see our walls, our floors. There was the throw blanket, the lamp, the coffee table, all listed as gently used with prices way below what they were worth. Grace asked if I knew about this. I told her I didn't. She asked if she should say something to her mom. No, I told her, let me handle it. I took screenshots of everything. I made a folder on my computer, started keeping track. This wasn't staging. This was liquidation. She was selling off our home, piece by piece, and she was hiding it. Then the real punch came. I got a letter in the mail from the 529 plan we'd set up for Grace's college fund. A withdrawal. $8,000 gone. I called the company immediately. They told me the withdrawal was authorized by the joint account holder, Chloe Brown. I asked when. They said 3 weeks ago. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the wall. That money was supposed to be untouchable. We'd been putting into it since Grace was born. It wasn't for us. It was for her future. When Chloe got home that night, I asked her about it. I even kept my voice calm. I said I saw the 529 statement. She didn't even flinch. She said she needed it for the business, that it was technically our money and she'd pay it back. I told her it was Grace's money. She just said, kids figure it out, student loans exist. You're being dramatic. I just nodded. I didn't argue. But that night, I realized something. She wasn't building a business. She was building an exit. And she didn't care who she buried on the way out. So, I started documenting everything. Every transaction, every receipt, every piece of furniture that walked out the door. I made spreadsheets. I took photos. I tracked every dollar. And then I found a charge on our joint credit card I didn't recognize. A storage unit. Industrial area. $180 a month. I didn't ask her about it. I just added it to the file because I knew what was coming. And when it did, I was going to be ready. Here's what I learned from 20 years of inspecting buildings: the most dangerous problems aren't the ones you can see right away. It's the slow leak behind the wall, the hairline crack in the foundation that spreads an inch every year. By the time most people notice, the damage is catastrophic. Chloe's plan was the same. Gradual. Calculated. Designed to look normal until it was too late. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed I wouldn't pay attention to the details. Have you ever ignored small warning signs in a relationship, thinking they'd just go away on their own? For the next 6 weeks, I lived like I was conducting the most important inspection of my career. I had a filing system in my home office that would make an accountant weep with joy. Bank statements with transactions highlighted in yellow. Credit card bills with charges circled in red. Photos of every piece of furniture that had disappeared, time-stamped and cataloged. I had a spreadsheet tracking the storage unit payments. Another one for the business. Expenses that made no sense. Chloe thought I was just working late, buried in permit applications and violation reports. She had no idea I was building a case. The storage unit was the piece that bothered me most. Why would someone running a legitimate staging business need a separate storage facility when we had a 2-car garage that was basically empty? I drove past it one Saturday morning. Industrial area, chain link fence, units that looked like they hadn't been painted since the 90s. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just needed to know it existed. I needed one person I could trust to look at the numbers. Someone who'd tell me if I was seeing things or if this was as bad as I thought. I called Michael, my buddy from high school who'd become a certified public accountant. We met at his place one evening, just the two of us in his basement. I brought the files. Michael went through everything with his reading glasses on, making little noises every few pages. After about 40 minutes, he looked up at me. She's either terrible at business, or she's hiding money. Maybe both. He showed me the patterns, money going into the business account, but not much coming out where it should, expenses that didn't match up with revenue. The staging business showed virtually no profit, but she was spending like it was thriving. Then, Michael said something that changed everything. He said, "Arthur, listen to me. Ownership isn't just about assets. It's about liabilities, too. If she takes everything in a divorce, she takes all the debt, all the taxes, all the penalties that come with it." I sat back in my chair and just stared at him. He asked if I understood what he was saying. I told him I understood perfectly. 3 weeks later, Chloe served me with divorce papers. Not in some dramatic public scene, just at breakfast on a Sunday morning. Grace was still asleep upstairs. Chloe's sister, Vivian, was there, sitting at our kitchen table like she'd been invited to a business meeting. Chloe had a list. She wanted the house, both cars, 100% of the business, and 50-50 on my pension. Then she said, "Grace can stay with you. I don't have time to deal with a teenager right now." Vivian nodded like this was all perfectly reasonable. I just sat there with my coffee. I didn't react. I didn't argue. Then I heard a noise from the hallway. Grace was standing there in her pajamas. She'd heard everything. She looked at her mother and said, "Wow, Mom. Really feeling the love here." Chloe told her not to be dramatic. Grace didn't say anything else. She just turned around and went back upstairs. I heard her bedroom door close. That's when I knew I wasn't just protecting money or property anymore. I was protecting my daughter from being erased. I looked at Chloe and said, "Okay, you can have it." Vivian's face lit up like she just won the lottery. Chloe looked confused, like she'd been expecting a fight and didn't know what to do when she didn't get one. She asked if I was serious. I told her I'd have my lawyer draw up the papers. Then I left the table and went to work. That afternoon, I called George Braddock. He'd handled a property dispute for me years ago. The kind of attorney who reads every word of every document like he's defusing a bomb. I also looked at apartments and signed a lease on a 2-bedroom place across town by the end of the week. Grace needed somewhere stable that wasn't filled with constant tension, and I needed space to think clearly. I met George at his office the next day and laid out everything. The marketplace listings. The 529 withdrawal. The storage unit. The business financials Michael had gone through. George looked at it all and said, "This is gold, but we don't wave it around." He explained the strategy. We'd give her what she wanted, but we'd structure it so she couldn't wriggle out later. The house would be hers, but she'd have to refinance it in her name within 90 days, or it goes up for sale. No extensions, no excuses. The $8,000 from Grace's college fund would be offset against her share of assets, paid back immediately. The business would be hers completely, which meant all the debts, all the vendor obligations, all the potential tax issues that came with unreported income. George drafted the agreement. It was clean on the surface. She gets the house, the cars, the business. I keep my pension. She gets nothing from it. Everything disclosed in the appendices, Exhibits C through F, 214 pages of financial records, business documents, transaction histories, all attached, all incorporated. George told me most people don't read the appendices. They just initial and sign. 2 weeks later, Chloe tried to get cute. She filed an emergency motion claiming I was wasting marital assets. She said, "I bought a boat. I don't own a boat. Never have." George submitted my bank record showing no boat purchase. The judge tossed it in about 5 minutes. Then someone filed an anonymous complaint with my employer claiming I'd taken bribes on inspections. It went nowhere because it wasn't true, but it was clearly meant to rattle me. Then Vivian showed up at the house one evening demanding to see Grace, claiming it was urgent. We'd installed a video doorbell by then. Grace recorded the whole thing. Vivian spent 10 minutes at the door insisting Chloe had rights, that I was poisoning Grace against her mother. Grace told her through the intercom that if her mom wanted to talk, she could call like a normal person. Vivian finally left. George said, "Keep all of it. This is leverage if we need it." The mediation was scheduled for early June. We met at a conference room downtown. Chloe showed up with her lawyer, Evelyn Black, who had a reputation for being aggressive but not particularly detail-oriented. Vivian was there too, sitting behind Chloe like a coach. Evelyn had the settlement agreement in front of her. She was flipping through pages fast, barely stopping. George sat next to me, completely calm. The mediator went through the terms. Chloe gets sole ownership of the house, the cars, the business assets. I get my pension, no split. Custody of Grace stays with me. An $8,000 offset for the college fund withdrawal. Vivian was leaning forward, whispering to Chloe something about how the pension was where my real money was, and she should fight for it. Chloe ignored her. She was too focused on the house, the cars, the idea of keeping everything. Evelyn got to the signature page and pointed. She told Chloe to initial here, here, and here, then sign at the bottom. I watched Chloe sign without reading a single appendix. Evelyn barely glanced at them either. George cleared his throat. "Just to confirm," he said, "Exhibits C through F are incorporated as attached. All 214 pages." The mediator asked if both parties acknowledged receipt and review. I said yes. Chloe said yes. Evelyn said yes. George made a note. The final hearing was set for June 14th in front of Judge Thompson. We all stood up. Chloe looked at me with this little smile, like she'd just played me. Vivian squeezed her shoulder. They walked out looking like they'd won. George packed up his briefcase. "She has no idea what. She just signed," he said. I asked if he was sure this would hold. "Arthur," he said, "not reading properly disclosed documents isn't grounds for appeal. It's malpractice, and that's her lawyer's problem, not ours." We left the building. I sat in my truck for a few minutes. Grace texted asking how it went. I told her I'd explain at home. She sent back a thumbs up. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. Chloe thought she'd won. She had no clue what was buried in those appendices. And in 10 days, Judge Thompson was going to read them out loud. The morning of June 14th, I woke up at 5:30 and couldn't fall back asleep. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the sun come up through the window. Grace came down around 6, already dressed. She asked if I was nervous. I told her no, just ready for it to be over. She poured herself orange juice and said, "Dad, whatever happens today, I'm glad I'm here with you." I didn't trust myself to say much, so I just nodded. We got to the courthouse at 8:45. George was waiting outside the courtroom in his usual dark suit, briefcase in hand. He asked if I was ready. I told him I'd been ready for months. Grace squeezed my arm and said she'd wait in the hallway. She didn't want to be in the room when it all went down. We walked in and took our seats at the table on the left. Chloe was already there on the right side with Evelyn. Vivian was in the first row behind them, dressed like she was attending a wedding. Chloe looked confident, relaxed even. She glanced over at me once, and there was that same little smile from the mediation. Evelyn had a thin folder in front of her. George had 3 binders stacked neatly, each one tabbed and labeled. Judge Thompson came in at 9 o'clock on the dot. Everyone stood. She was in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back, the kind of judge who'd seen every trick in the book and had no patience for nonsense. She sat down, opened the file, and told everyone else to sit. She looked at both of us and said we were here to finalize the dissolution of marriage, that both parties had agreed to terms at mediation. She asked if we both understood and accepted those terms as written. Chloe said, "Yes, Your Honor." I said, "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Thompson started going through the standard language: property division, no spousal support, custody arrangements. It was all procedural, exactly what we'd agreed to. Vivian was smiling. Then George stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "just for the record, the settlement agreement incorporates Exhibits C through F as attached, 214 pages of financial disclosures and business documentation." Judge Thompson looked up. She asked if both parties had received copies of these exhibits. George said, "Yes, Your Honor." Provided at mediation and acknowledged in writing. The judge turned to Evelyn. "Did you review these exhibits with your client? Yes or no?" The courtroom got very quiet. Evelyn froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked down at her thin folder like the answer might be hiding in there. Judge Thompson repeated the question, slower this time. Evelyn finally said, "Your Honor, we reviewed the primary terms of the agreement." Judge Thompson's expression didn't change, but her tone dropped about 10 degrees. "Counselor, that's not what I asked." She flipped to a page in the file. "According to the mediator's notes, you signed a statement confirming receipt and review of all attached exhibits. Is that your signature?" Evelyn said yes. "But, Your Honor, if I may explain," Judge Thompson cut her off. "No, you may not. I asked a yes or no question, and you answered it." George sat down. I could feel Chloe starting to tense up next to Evelyn. Judge Thompson opened one of the binders in front of her. "Let's go through what's actually in these exhibits since apparently we need to." She started reading. Exhibit C shows outstanding vendor obligations for the staging business totaling $47,000. Exhibit D documents a storage facility with accumulated late fees and code violations totaling approximately $6,000. Exhibit E includes correspondence from 3 different creditors regarding unpaid invoices. Exhibit F contains copies of business income records that appear to show unreported revenue, which may trigger an inquiry from the Internal Revenue Service. Vivian's smile was gone. Chloe's face had gone completely white. Evelyn was flipping through papers, trying to find something to say. Judge Thompson kept going. She said, "Mrs. Brown, you agreed to take sole ownership of the business and all assets associated with it, which means you also took sole responsibility for all debts, obligations, and potential tax liabilities associated with those assets. Do you understand that now?" Chloe didn't answer right away. She turned to Evelyn. "You told me everything was fine." Evelyn said, "We can file a motion to reconsider based on..." Judge Thompson cut her off. "Based on what, counselor?" "Based on your client not reading documents that were properly disclosed and that you confirmed reviewing?" She looked at Chloe. "Mrs. Brown, your husband disclosed everything. It was in the appendices. You signed a document acknowledging receipt. This agreement is exactly what you asked for." Vivian stood up in the gallery. "This is fraud. This is entrapment." Judge Thompson told her to sit down immediately or she'd be removed from the courtroom. Vivian sat. Chloe looked across the table at me. Her eyes were wild, desperate. She said, "You knew. You knew all of this." I kept my voice calm. "I disclosed everything, Chloe. It was in the appendices. You signed acknowledging receipt. You wanted sole ownership, and you got it." George added, "Your Honor, just to be clear, all financial records were obtained legally. All debts listed are legitimate business obligations. Nothing was hidden or fabricated." Judge Thompson closed the binder. "I'm going to be very clear. The time to realize what you were signing was before you signed it, not after. This agreement was negotiated, mediated, and signed by both parties. I'm entering it as written. She looked at Evelyn. Counselor, your client's failure to read properly disclosed documents is not grounds for appeal. That's a malpractice issue between you and her. Evelyn's face went red. Judge Thompson continued. Mrs. Brown, you have 90 days to refinance the house in your name alone or the property will be listed for sale. No extensions. The $8,000 offset for the college fund withdrawal will be paid within 30 days. You retain full ownership and full liability for the business. She signed the order. This dissolution is final. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Everyone stood. Chloe just sat there, staring at the table. Vivian was already heading for the door. Evelyn packed up her folder without looking at Chloe. George shook my hand. I'll file the refinance motion in 91 days if needed. We walked out into the hallway. Grace was waiting on a bench by the windows. She stood up when she saw me. I told her it was done. She asked how bad it was for her mom. I said, bad enough. Then I told her the judge locked in the offset. Her college fund would be whole again within 30 days. Grace's eyes got bright. She hugged me hard. You absolute legend. We left the courthouse. Over the next 3 months, I watched it all fall apart for Chloe exactly the way George said it would. She couldn't refinance because her credit was trashed and the business income didn't support the mortgage. George filed the motion. Judge Thompson ordered the house listed for sale. It sold fast, but for less than Chloe hoped, because she was desperate. After the mortgage payoff, the liens, the property taxes, and the realtor commission, there was almost nothing left. The storage unit got inspected after a complaint about fire code violations. The lease was terminated, and she got hit with penalties for improper storage of flammable materials. Creditors started seizing inventory to cover debts. The staging business collapsed in about 6 weeks. Then the Internal Revenue Service sent letters requesting documentation and scheduling an audit. They wanted explanations for why reported income didn't match bank deposits. Chloe moved in with Vivian. I heard they lasted about a month before the fighting got too bad. Grace stayed with me in the apartment. She made honor roll that semester, a 3.6 grade point average. We started new routines, movie nights on Saturdays, pancakes on Sunday mornings. She seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. One night, she asked me if I felt bad about what happened to her mom. I thought about it for a while. I told her I felt bad that it came to this, but I didn't feel bad for protecting her future and making sure her mom faced the consequences of her own choices. Grace nodded. She said, "Good, because I don't either." Here's what I want you to take away from this. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let people have exactly what they asked for, especially when they're so sure they know better than you. Chloe wanted everything. She got it, and it buried her. The house I've learned to inspect isn't just made of wood and concrete. It's made of choices. Some people build solid foundations. Others cut corners, hide the damage, and hope no one notices until they're gone. But eventually, every structure gets inspected. And when it does, the truth comes out. Chloe thought she was playing me. She thought I was too trusting, too passive, too focused on my work to see what she was doing. She was wrong. I saw everything. I just waited for the right moment to let her bury herself. If there's one thing my job has taught me, it's this: you can paint over rot, but it doesn't make the rot go away. It just makes it someone else's problem when the walls finally come down. Chloe wanted to own everything. Now she owns the consequences. And me? I'm sitting in a small apartment with my daughter, eating pancakes on Sunday mornings, watching her thrive. That's the foundation I built, and it's the only one that matters. Would you have done the same thing, or would you have fought to keep what was yours?